Hello everyone. We are back. And today we're going to be looking at a couple games from the UZ Chess Cup or Uzi Chess Cup. I don't know how it's pronounced. And the idea is to start a new series here where I'm going to be looking at openings that happen in high level chess events. And I'll be trying to cover them in good detail so you can try them in your own games. So my idea with the series is that we're going to be looking at openings, as of course from high level games, but the emphasis is going to be on finding ideas that you probably haven't seen before. So they're actually, tries that won't require too much theoretical knowledge because basically no one knows these lines. But also, and I really made this a priority because I think a lot of players neglect to do this in opening videos or when they're giving opening ideas. I wanted to find lines that are objectively really strong, right? So for white players, these are ones that truly are pushing for the edge no matter what. Even if black plays all the right moves, white will still have at least, the slightly better position as the result of all of that. And for black, it's never like worse than maybe like zero point 0.3 or zero point 0.4. And even that would be pushing, I would say, objectively. So basically, we're just looking for absolutely great openings that for some reason or other have flown under the radar for all this time. And yeah, again, I think this is just the best way to go about doing things because playing for traps is just not that smart. So in this video, we're going to be looking at ideas for white from the e4 side. And we'll just get going into this game, I guess. Yeah, I have 4 games that we're going to look at, and I think they're all some pretty smart ideas. And before that, I guess I should mention the players for this game. Mataminov is the guy who actually won the tournament. As you can see, his rating is 2586. He was actually the lowest rated player in this tournament. And yeah, I guess also from Uzbekistan. So they just have even more players, more prodigies than we've even heard of, right? I mean, we thought it was bad enough with Sindarov and Abdusatorov, but here is another victim, or I guess victimizer, about to rise the ranks. And again, an incredible tournament for him. He gained 25 rating points. And he did it with fighting chess too, which is fun, right? He had 4 wins, 2 losses. And one thing that helps when you're the bottom seed, and I've actually enjoyed this too, if you are a bottom seed in a tournament, it's the best, right? Because you don't have to worry about your opponents trying to draw you shamelessly, because they can't do that. They're going to be trying to beat you. So even with black, right, they will play crazy lines and give you an opportunity to win. And that really, at the highest level, is probably the nicest thing you could ask for, right? Because, I mean, usually your opponents are trying to shut down all the play. But notice how he's very clearly the lowest rated player here. The other funny thing is the second clearly lowest rated player, another Uzbekistan player, in fact, who tied with him, and then Mataminov won the tie breaks, was the second lowest rated player, right? By a big margin. Like, look, 2637. The third lowest rated was Yakobayev or Nordirbek Yakobayev, and he was 2689. So again, huge disparities here, but they're the ones who win the tournament. But anyhow, let's get going and looking at this game in which Mataminov in the first round played Nepomniachtchi, who, as we'll see, actually, this game actually ended up mattering because if Mataminov had not ended up winning it and everything else went the same, Nepomniachtchi actually would have at least been tied first in this tournament. And as mentioned, Mataminov at least did have the advantage of having the white pieces and Nepomniachtchi needing to win the game, which is why Nepomniachtchi chose to play the Sicilian, which already at the highest levels is actually considered a little bit risky. Obviously not dubious, but the main problem with it isn't that it's not theoretically sound, it is, but it just allows white to do whatever they want. And I think this game perfectly shows that problem. And now, knight f3 probably should be played by white. The only move that even comes close to being a theoretically challenging one, at a high level, not just for, online play or anything, is the Alpen, which at least is theoretically kind of interesting. But, objectively, black really can equalize without so much trouble. The open Sicilian really is the way to go, especially after d6. White just enters the main line. And this is now reaching the Najdorf after white plays knight c3. The Najdorf really is the objectively best try. Obviously, there are other moves. But here's the problem for black when black plays the Sicilian. Objectively, the structure is great. Black has good middle game chances with all the typical Sicilian ideas that you may or may not have heard of. The problem is white has a million ways to respond. And this is the key position that becomes a problem for white. I'll show some of the main lines. And the other problem for black is not only can white do whatever they want, and that forced black to memorize all the theory, white can choose whatever style of game they want, which is also kind of important. Let's say white just likes memorizing lines and loves being super aggressive. he'll probably then go for the classic old main line, bishop g5. Black pretty much has only one response if he wants to truly get equality, and that is to enter the poison pawn variation with e6, f4, queen b6, and queen d2. And, this is a completely fine line for black, but as you can see, it's just risky. We'll go over the main line here. White chases the queen back, and now can choose between both of these pawn breaks. As we can see here, black will actually end up often winning even more pawns, but obviously his king is still stuck in the center. White will get developed. Here is I'm just clicking the most popular moves here. And as you can see here, actually, this is not a bad line for black. I mean, white has to know what they're doing, and, black has definitely won games where white hasn't known what they're doing. The problem is, if white players play this line, they are certainly just, theoretical monsters. And I mean, look, even this move, queen a5, I mean, I guess this is really the best move to play. They're just unnatural moves, right? Let's say white players just want to attack you and they just want to be normal. Then they can go with the English attack, which is, I think, probably kind of the modern main line. And this leads to what we think of when we think of the Najdorf. We think of exciting pawn storms, right? We go through the main line here, and black probably should play the move h5. I believe this move is caught on more and probably is best. But either way, castling kingside is fine. And now we get a base race, right? Where both sides pawn storm. And they get really exciting, right? Because both sides get to attack each other at the same time. And when they retreat their knights, then the pawns keep on rolling. And it is just so much fun, right? This is exactly what you want to see. And, white should sack the knight, but then black's bishop also is trapped, and all kinds of chaos ensues. So again, another good try for white. White can also just say, all right, that is fun, but let me just say I don't want too much chaos. So after bishop e3, e5, he just says, I'll just back up to f3 instead, and I'll play the positional route. I'll say you weaken d5, and I'll just castle kingside and make it super boring. So as you can see here, white can really choose the style of play. Then there's even the Adams attack with h3, which is recently catching on, preparing to play g4 without committing the f-pawn, so maybe the pawn will go to f4 without wasting a tempo. And, black has to be ready for all of these moves. And as we'll see after this game, he's got another move he needs to worry about. And this is where, I guess, the new theoretical try begins. Nepomniachtchi played the move a4. Now you could say in one sense a4 makes sense as a positional try. In fact, in many positions, if your opponent plays a6, you should actually just reflexively play a4 without even thinking. Although the Najdorf was not thought to be one of those positions. This is obviously the main idea of this move. I mean, I guess it helps activate the rook, but really the main idea is just to rent b5 and also to play the move a5, which, as we'll see, happens very quickly. Because then, if b5 is played, white can capture and just leave black with a weak a-pawn that he's fixed on a6. And if black doesn't capture, then there's possibilities of putting a knight here and just basically clamping down the queen side. And this is a very annoying move. And white hasn't committed anything or weakened anything. Black now has to choose what setup they want to go for. Black can play in typical Najdorf fashion, or he can go for something else. Nepomniachtchi, though, after a bit of a think, 5-minute think, which for Nepomniachtchi is actually a long think, so I mean, I guess he probably is actually out of theory at this point. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. He might have just been innovating, but there's no way he prepared this. He must have been out of theory. But he probably thought he played e5, the Najdorf move. He probably correctly figured that Nepomniachtchi was pretty prepared, and I'm sure Nepomniachtchi was. What the idea for white in this opening is, pretty simply, is to again clamp down on the d5 square. And if black goes for this line, white will not play knight b3. White will play knight f3, and white's plan is simple. He will just go ahead and win that bishop, trade the knight bishop off for the knight on f6, and clamp on d5. And you might wonder why it's so important for white to take that knight in d5 on f6. Sorry, my bad. And the reason is the knight in f6 defends d5. So for instance, let's say black just ignores that. Then white just goes ahead and just directly takes this knight, plops the knight on d5, and claims that they're a little bit better. Now, it's not a massive advantage. I'm playing the best moves, by the way, for black also here. I'm not just showing fake lines. This is all the most popular stuff here. And after this, bishop c4, you just clamp here. The best moves have been figured out to be rook c8. I should mention, well, I mean, there are other okay moves for black, but this is the best attempt. And now, white can either just retreat the bishop to a2 or play queen e2. And for instance, after queen e2, knight b6, white can either choose to win back this bishop, or he can choose to take the knight, followed by taking the bishop. And white just has a more pleasant position either way. Let's just go down one of these lines. The more popular move is to just go ahead and take here. And after we trade off everything, again, this isn't a horrible position for black, but only white can win this one because the weak d6 pawn and, for instance, after castles. I mean, there's a few moves, but rook fd1 is kind of the most obvious one. And, black just has to be defending a slightly worse position. But there were other tries also. This is not the only way white can play this, but we can see this is just a positionally easier game for white. And in fact, let's go back. So you might think, well, should black just go ahead and prevent this? Black can do that, but that does take a tempo that white can now use to just, increase his bind in the position. There are a few moves. I mean, bishop c4 would be the most obvious one, and that one's fine. But apparently, I'm also seeing that knight d2 might actually be, and this has not been played as much, but an even stronger try. And this is to really go and clamp down on d5 also through this way. Also, the knight in c4, which we might see after bishop e7, knight c4, also prepares to go a5 and clamp down on b6. So as we see here, this has a unique flavor, and if black players are not surprised, if they're not prepared for this, it's easy for them to end up worse pretty quickly. And again, keep in mind, this is after black playing all the best moves. I'm not showing like really bad lines for black. These are the best tries for black. And so you can see they lead to okay positions for black, but not usually what he's looking for, right? Black is normally looking for the opportunity to play b5, plop a rook in c8, use the knight to either go to b6 or do something really annoying. White is just stopping all of that. And black is okay, sure, but he's just kind of stuck in his side of the board defending against our threats while we get to have all the fun. And he won't be prepared for it. So again, I would say ace4 is a very good try if you're looking for something against the Najdorf and you've found you don't like studying and memorizing too much theory. The other thing I should mention is it's not like it's all boring and you won't get any attacks. Sure, if black plays the best moves, you're just left with a slight advantage. Like, oh, how sad. But what if black isn't content with that? That's what we'll see in this game. Nepomniachtchi played h6. And again, this is just to get out of theory. I mean, also, he is seeing this idea, right? He's probably thinking of playing e5, and he figures, okay, I'm going to prevent the pin in advance. Let's see what white does. White didn't mind. White just played bishop c4. I mean, why wouldn't you? And Nepomniachtchi now correctly decided not to play e5 here. At this point, with white's bishop already on c4, e5 would have just been way too risky and would have allowed knight f5. And, the d5 clamp is obvious. Black has fallen behind development, and white will just keep bringing the pieces out and targeting d6 and stuff. It's just not a good idea. So black played e6, and this is correct. The problem is it's obviously pretty passive, and oftentimes black can get away with this, but he just has to leave himself up for suffering. And I think it's really impressive what white was able to do in the game to generate an initiative here. So white castled, black now challenged white's knight with knight to c6, which might have been a slight inaccuracy, but it makes sense. I mean, he could have also just played bishop e7, the more passive attempt, but white now just gets to play typical fashion. And this is what I should mention. If black doesn't play e5, this is the problem for black in the Sicilian. White often just develops an easy kingside attack with f4 very quickly. Not immediately, because there can be some tricks. But first, white can bring his queen out here to maybe put a rook in d1 eventually. Probably the other one. Play bishop e3 and f4. And white has a very healthy position. The other rook will probably go to d1 eventually. Stopping b5 has really helped white, because now black has no real counterplay. And black is just essentially stuck hoping that these advances don't work. And already, white has a slight edge, but it's very easy for that to generate into something a lot more dangerous. Let's say, for instance, man, these are just not tempting moves. I guess I can fine. I'll just show the best move for queen c7. Okay, black players will play that one. Now white should play f5, which kind of forces e5. And then white can just retreat, and maybe he should. But apparently even the move knight e6 is possible, which is really cool. And this is a crazy move. Look at this. You take the knight, you take back with the pawn, and when black moves the knight, then you go knight d5. What a try. You got to say, this is pretty insane. Like, look at this line. White doesn't even win the piece back. White is just saying my initiative is so powerful and your pieces are so garbage. Well, I guess the bishop's never really getting out. That in the long term, I have enough of an initiative. Look at this brilliant attack. Like, let's say, for instance, b6 to try to get the bishop out. White has such a strong initiative and black is so slow. And he might not even not want to put this bishop here because now rook f7 is coming. And it turns out white is just destroying black. Again, obviously this is a crazy sample line. But it does go to show that, this, and queen c7 is certainly the most obvious move. Black's got to be careful here. Also, white could just be normal and play knight f3 and have a great position with the attack still continuing. So, as we see here, that really just gives white a clear advantage. So maybe that's what Nepomniachtchi was avoiding. He didn't want to just go play passively. He probably saw f4 was coming. The problem with this move was it does leave these pawns kind of vulnerable, and white now realizes he can turn them into a target. He played the excellent move a5, fixing this over here. and leaving himself possibilities to put the knight in b6. Black developed, white developed, and d6 is potentially weak. White is threatening to play e5 and destroy this pawn structure and leave black with a isolated pawn c6. For instance, that would happen if black is simply castled. This forced black to play d5, which is okay, but now, he's also kind of compromised this a little bit, and both these pawns will become kind of weak. Sorry. Bishop d3 was played, and now black played c5, which, okay, he would need to play eventually. Otherwise, this bishop is just buried forever. So, white traded, and you might think at first, oh, let's just play against these hanging pawns. And that would have been good. Knight a4 was objectively probably the best move, to go knight b6 next and play against these guys. White played rook e1 first, and black played the move bishop e6. Now, black also could have castled here, which maybe was objectively stronger. But bishop e6 is completely reasonable. And I think this just goes to show how white actually has a lot of tactical opportunities in this line if black doesn't play the most precise moves. White could have actually taken an e6 and sacked the exchange outright here. And the reasoning is, after the trade back, white's unopposed light square bishop is really dangerous, and he can just simply target the e6 pawn, and black will really struggle to defend this pawn. Obviously he doesn't want to put his queen here, because it's not like white doesn't have other ideas. White can also try to move the knight still to get in here. Notice how that would leave the king in a really bad place. And so, for instance, after bishop d6, which is really the only defensive try, in fact, everything else would just get destroyed really quickly. Although I should admit, the lines are really pretty. For instance, rook e8, trying to sack the would run to knight b5. White doesn't even need to take the thing back. He just goes in for the kill. After bishop d6, though, white trades, attacks this guy, and yeah, after black defends, the attack just keeps on going. After this crazy move queen d2, which again, I'm sure is probably why Mana Minoff, there's no way he saw this one, right? He's going to open the king more, play bishop f5. It's nothing for being down in exchange. But anyway, obviously this is just crazy. There was no reason that white had to do this, and white's move queen d2 is good enough. Because after black castled, because what else is he going to do? White was able to take an h6. And this is kind of a classic example of when this works out really well. This is just completely losing for black. Completely losing. The threats are to just play rook takes e6 and have a lot of checks here, but also to just do a rook lift, which is the really simple way to win, or rook e5. And black correctly saw he would just get absolutely crushed. For instance, the queen check followed by rook 8. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll give a sample move. I don't even know what you'd play as black, because the rook lift is just that powerful. Let's say bishop d6 to maybe guard in some line. Then the best way to win is knight takes d5. And with a couple ideas, you can't take with the knight, obviously, because then you get checkmated. While if the bishop takes, now you take here. And because you've deflected this guy, you are threatening now to play queen here and then checkmate. But if the bishop goes back, now you can play rook f3, among other moves, and simply attack the knight that's defending checkmate. Probably even funnier, though, is the move rook a4 when you just have a double rook lift. Rook a4 is pretty good. So that doesn't work. So black played the move c4, correctly figuring once this bishop moves, then I can take your bishop and not get destroyed. So white sacked it again with bishop takes g7. Now, unfortunately for black this time, he's got a lot to worry about. He cannot take back this bishop, obviously. That will just get him checkmated really quickly. With the most accurate way of doing it, just being check, 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 rook lift, good game. So he took the bishop on d3, which was correct. Now white cannot get away with queen h6, no matter how tempting it might look, because knight h7 does threaten to trade off this bishop, and white cannot take here. That would just leave black with a huge initiative now. So white took back the exchange, and at the end of the day, look at this. He just ended up with a free extra, rook and 3 pawns for 2 bishops. And I guess this is actually not so unreasonable for black. He did survive, but he went on to get outplayed and win, and white won the position. And to be honest, it's just really tough to deal with this. With a little consolidation, black still has to worry about his king. It's going to be tough for black to fight back. Indeed, white found the move rook a4, and after a couple more moves, black, I guess, technically made the blunder with rook b8. He just didn't want to keep his rook passive, understandably. But it turned out going for this was worse, because now the a-pawn decided the game pretty quickly. And we'll play the rest of the game quickly. This is what happened. The a-pawn was just too good, and the 2 bishops were not really that great. Okay, there were still checkmate threats. So finally, in this position, black resigned, correctly seeing that, it's actually just horrible. He just has no counterplay for all the stuff being attacked and the a-pawn. So Yeah, to summarize, this was just, I think, a really great example of showing how effective this kind of just unknown idea is, a4. Just preventing the opponent from wanting to do what they normally do. And black is just stuck looking pretty passive, unless he goes for those main lines, which, as we mentioned, allows white to control d5. So let's go to the next game. Again, featuring Nepomniachtchi, unfortunately losing, or fortunately. I guess some people might hate Nepomniachtchi now for some reason. But this game, white is Vokidov, this guy who finished second place, right? The other great Uzbekistan player, or I guess future great. I guess he's already pretty great. Who are we kidding? And this time, I guess I don't know if these are compatriots that are like learning from each other or share openings because they actually just did. He did a different attempt. So to give Nepomniachtchi credit, because I believe this was round two. I forgot what round this was, but this is after the first one. The first game was round one. Nepomniachtchi still played the Sicilian again. So I guess he probably figured, I'm sure he studied that first game. Maybe he thought that this other Uzbekistan player was going to do the same exact thing. But nope. This guy had a different idea in mind and played bishop b5 check, the Moscow variation. Now, the good thing is when you're playing a higher rated, you can almost certainly count on them to not play what is the objectively best move, bishop d7, because no high rated player wants to enter this position. Whether you take back with the knight or the queen, it is just so hard to generate winning chances for black. Like, this is probably the best try. And there's a lot of good moves. Castling is fine. c4 is maybe objectively the best one to just set up a Maroczy bind without light squared bishops, which is usually white's worst piece in this kind of position. Notice without the light squared bishop trapped behind the pawns, white doesn't mind controlling these light squares. But there's even just castles, and this is just so hard to win. So black players don't do that, and they play a worse move. Knight c6 is kind of just known to be bad these days. It's just too simple for white to just play c3 and d4 eventually and just have a good free center. So black played knight d7 just to be weird, right? This is just to have play for a win, which fair enough, and it's a fine move. White played a different try though. Now d4 is the most common move, but after c takes d4, the vast majority, almost everyone, over 80% of players play queen takes d4, saying, well, your knight went here, so let's be annoying with my queen. And it's a completely fine move, but honestly, I think black's pretty comfortable here. I mean, the queen does get attacked, and black gets developed kind of quickly. So I like what white played more. Knight takes d4. And this is kind of, I guess you'd say, is the key innovation if you play this line as white and you play the Moscow variation. After black plays knight f6, which is kind of the only move, I should mention that a6, while not horrible, isn't actually that good. White backs up the bishop to d3, and the whole point of white playing this line is to play the Maroczy bind. The Maroczy bind is when white puts pawns on c4 and e5, typically against the Sicilian, and tells black, you will never play any of your desired pawn breaks of b5 or d5. And this basically means, if done correctly, black has to sit around and wait forever, while white slowly builds up the position, and eventually white gets their own pawn break, either by storming the king side or by playing on the queen side. And this would be an example of black screwing up and allowing white to set up, oops, a nice Maroczy bind. So black does not want to do that. I mean, you don't want to just have no play. So black played knight f6, attacking e4, except not really, because white just castled. And this is, I think, why this is a great try for you, if you want to play this as a line. In fact, I played this for many years. Most of my chess life, yeah, I copied my uncle for openings. He's a master also, and he played this line. He had some brilliant games. I wish I remembered them. But anyway, after castles, he had a game where his opponent took the pawn. I actually did too, but I lost the game, so let's not talk about that. It wasn't the opening's fault. It was my fault. After knight takes e4, which if we go to the online database on Lichess, we find that, yeah, look at that. 5,000 games that feature knight takes e4. White plays the obvious rook e1, of course, and after the knight backs up, which is the most obvious move, d5 just runs into c4, and black has not really helped himself at all. This pawn's just going to fall. Black's actually already losing. Knight f6, white plays knight f5, and black is forced to just give up the pawn. But it doesn't even end there. The suffering continues after e6. After e6, oh, I should also mention that, okay, this is ridiculous. There's so many players, like, and I put the database on for only players that, okay, this includes everybody, but like a lot of players are actually just blunder knight takes d6 checkmate. But okay, whatever. This is the Lichess database. After e6, which is the only move, when everything gets traded off, black has to play queen e7 to try to get, his king castled. White is destroying black either after accepting the queen trade or backing up like this. You might think, oh yeah, this is a free attack, but even that game might even be more winning, because after b3, this initiative ain't ending. So anyway, and white has the bishop pair. So we go back here, rook e1, black is just getting destroyed. So black can't take the pawn. And so he correctly didn't because he's a grandmaster. There's a few other moves. A6 is the most popular move and probably one of the best ones. Again, white is just going to try to play the Moraxi bind. And after knight's bishop d3, knight c5, this is black's best move because he prevents the Moraxi bind. But it turns out it's still pretty comfortable for white. I should mention if you want to play this line, and I am going over this because this is the main variation for black these days at the highest levels, white is going to recapture if black takes this bishop with the c pawn. And the reason is black's going to win the bishop pair, so white prefers to have a symmetrical pawn structure because generally when you have the bishop pair, you want pawns to be unbalanced so they can do more crazy things, the bishops. And in this line, black can take, but if he chooses not to take, white can actually just play kind of normally. Oh, he can actually throw this idea again, a4, a5 to put a bind here. And he just has a very comfortable game. You can break the rooks in. Again, this is a very slow position, not the most exciting, but white is better, and that's something these days in the opening. And again, as mentioned, this is the best play for black. This isn't just like showing some random line. The other moves, let's see. The move play in the game, my Nepomniachtchi was g6. And he only took a minute this time, so I don't know if he's prepared or not. But again, I think he was not in preparation. Nepomniachtchi just always plays fast, but this is not a good move. Even though it's probably the most obvious one for certain players. The problem with it is, as we'll see, well, it's not even so horrible, but white is going to try to set the Moraxi bind immediately and torture black. So white's problem immediately for trying to set the Moraxi bind is, well, for one thing, e4 is attacked, so he had to defend that. And after bishop g7, you might think, well, can we just set up immediately with c4? But this doesn't work out because the bishop is really misplaced on b5. After black castles, white has to worry about this bishop just getting attacked. For instance, if white plays knight c3, it's actually pretty bad because knight b6 comes. And after a6, this bishop's going to be lost in a really bad way. So what does white do against all this? Bishop f1. And I would say if you know this, this is all you need to memorize. And the whole idea is just play the Moraxi bind next. And Nepomniachtchi is a GM. He knows the Moraxi bind is death sentence for him. He's never going to beat the lower rated opponent at that point if it happens. And it's just that difficult to play a Moraxi bind for black. As mentioned, the pawn breaks are stopped. So white will often just bring pieces to good squares. They could really be anywhere. And then white decides, do I want to attack him like that? Or do I want to attack him like this, depending on how he positioned his pieces? It's just basically the worst for black. And you can find many good games of white players making their opponents very miserable. So Nepomniachtchi did everything he could to stop the bind and played knight c5, attacking the pawn. White defended it. And it was kind of clever because now if white goes for the bind, Nepomniachtchi was probably planning to play queen b6, whereas threats of knight c takes e4 and, unleashing this bishop and stuff are actually dangerous enough that, in conjunction with e5, of course, threatening stuff on the diagonal, that white actually, he can play this, but it's a little bit risky. So, Vokidov decided, all right, I don't have to play the bind yet. Now I'm ready because there's no queen b6 tricks. Black played d5. Again, so concerned about the Moraxi bind that he actually just gives himself an almost losing position trying to prevent it. Which I guess is understandable, but, he just had to accept that, okay, fine, my position sucks. I've just got to defend forever. But I guess who wants to do that, to be fair? So Nepomniachtchi lashed out. The problem was d5 just allows e5. And pretty simple play by white. White simply defended the center pawn, and black only made life even worse for him now. Because maybe he thought, okay, the pawn e5 is not going to kill me. The problem is the pieces still stayed really passive for him, and with tempo too. Obviously, knight's attacked. Now the pawn's attacked. And now, finally, after black's about to stabilize, white first prevents bishop g4, because that was black's one idea to get the bishop active. And then he actually took an f6. Basically trying to argue, I'm going to make this pawn the biggest weakness for you. And, if you take back with the bishop, which actually black should have done, these would just be two free weak pawns that just don't look very impressive. Although objectively, black should have gone for this. Instead, black took with the e pawn, and this allowed f5. Obviously, black doesn't want to take that and double up everything. And after some nice accurate moves, white just forced huge weaknesses, and black is actually already losing here because his pieces are kind of misplaced. And these pawns are really bad, and they will be attacked. So white first went after d5, and after black had to spend time defending that, bishop c4. It turned out that this wasn't the most accurate, but in either case, white did win a free pawn, and he went on to win the endgame. So what can you say? Tough luck for Nepomniachtchi. So you might think this is kind of mean of us, just, going over game after game of Nepomniachtchi losing, but the last two video games will actually be different because Nepomniachtchi's featured in every single game in this video, but in the last two, he's actually playing white and he wins. So let's take a look at those games now. All right. This time, Nepomniachtchi is playing Geisy, actually higher rated than him. So Nepomniachtchi just got upset twice, but he's actually going to upset his opponents in the next two games. So I guess it's just how it works. Ratings mean nothing, right? Ratings had an inverse correlation in this tournament with your standing, which is actually kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, okay, the top seed Geisy, I guess, finished with 5, so not horrible. But, oh no, sorry, Opsatorov. But that is still kind of strange, admittedly. But I mean, these guys are probably like, I don't know, 15, so that explains everything. Anyhow, this time Geisy, and you got to respect these guys in these games at least. Everyone's actually playing interesting stuff. They're not just all playing, Ruy Lopez draws and, well, what else is the most draw stuff? I mean, I don't know. Anyhow, let's just get going into the game. So this time, Geisy plays the Caro Kann, which is pretty cool. You don't see this one that much, but it's a good opening. The only problem with it is that white can do whatever they want, and if they have no clue what they're doing, you can't really punish them as black. And that's actually why I stopped playing the Caro Kann, because I mean, I guess I kind of want to prepare. And if you want to prepare and have fun preparing, you don't want to just prepare and be like, all right, I'm equal if I play right, and otherwise I'm worse, right? You want to at least prepare a line as black where your opponent can mess up and give you the advantage. And the Caro Kann's kind of limited in those kinds of lines. Your opponents can just develop their pieces as stereotypical squares, and you just can't do much about it except equalize. But with the Sicilian or even e4, e5, if white messes up, black can easily take over. Anyhow, the advanced Caro Kann is what Nepomniachtchi chooses to play. And this is now considered the main line, and it has been for a while. And it's definitely left nowadays. I don't know if the other lines are even played that much. If you're looking for an evil weapon, I would say this is what you want to go for. And let's see why it's so effective. Traditionally, black played the move bishop f5, which is kind of the main point of the Caro Kann, right? We're wasting time playing c6 when we'll probably play c5 later, because at least our bishop can get out to f5. But the short variation, which I'll show here, with just playing white, simply playing developing moves, is actually really problematic for black. White simply just plays knight f3 and bishop e2. And you might think to yourself, how can this be so dangerous? But it turns out there really are a lot of problems for black. He wants to play c5, which will have wasted a tempo for one thing. And this bishop actually gets vulnerable. That's why white purposely did not trade it off. He's going to try to harass it if black doesn't do the right stuff. So black has normally played c5 because he wants to break out eventually. But already this allows bishop e3, which, because there's potential dangers of taking on c5, not completely forces, but makes black's best move to take here. After which knight takes e4 is already causing this bishop problems. And here's the best moves. I'm just showing what theoretically is the most popular stuff. Bishop b5 is now played by white, just getting rid of this bishop. White's not worried because he'll win black's bishop right back and it hurts black's pawn structure. And essentially, there's a few move orders to do this. But the most accurate one is this, pawn to c4 after queen d7, which again needed to be played so that black can actually get his knight out so he can develop in castle. Again, these are all the best moves by black. White plays knight c3. And again, black is so tied down that his best move is to take on c4. Otherwise, black is actually seriously losing here because knight a4 is coming. Knight a4 is still best anyway, but after knight d5, which was cleared by d takes c4, white simply just takes, and he's just a lot better here. It's a very obvious advantage. He's down a pawn, but he's going to win that one back quickly. This one's not that great. The rook just goes here and targets it, and what's black going to do? Just be worse forever, right? So this is a sample line, but it's actually the best line for black, which should just go to show how tough this whole opening system is for black. We could go over the others another day, but I guess we don't have time. This isn't even the opening that was played. c5 was played. And black is saying, yeah, I wasted a tempo compared to the advanced French, which of course is this. But black is arguing, even though I wasted a tempo, well, my bishop will still get to go out, so hooray me. The problem is, well, there's a lot of problems. I actually played this line as black. I considered it to be the lesser of two evils when I played the Caro Kann because I just did not like bishop f5. I should also mention the ridiculous move h4 is also extremely dangerous. This threatens to trap the bishop and go for crazy attacks. And there's been tons of theory. Theory's exploded in this line, in fact, after h5. And for some reason, everyone was playing this for a while. It was all the rage. And white was just arguing, I have a more active position. Good luck defending. Well, I guess bad luck. And it was tough for black to hold. I mean, well, I guess black, they didn't scare all black players away, but it's a tough line for black. So anyhow, that's what made me actually switch to this move instead. But d takes c5 has long been known to be the best try. Usually you don't want to concede the center, but black wasted a tempo. And because knight c6 is actually refuted by the move f4, again, good to know if you're playing white here, I suppose, if you want to play this line. Um, Black had to play e6 and just trap his bishop on c8 and be kind of sad. And understandably, white players did not mind going for this one. So, I mean, it's still complicated. There's a few moves for theory. Bishop e3 is good. A3 was all the rage for a while. But white can even just play and just let black take the pawn back and just, clamp on the e5 pawn, overprotect it, and just claim, I can attack you because I have a pawn on e5. A lot of good lines for white. That's the problem with this stuff, right? White has it's like that Najdorf position. White has like 5 different approaches and they're all dangerous. So anyway, though, we'll look at a different attempt. Black players will be ready for g takes c5, but they won't be ready or nearly as ready for knight f3. So why knight f3? Well, there's a few good reasons to play it. Black should take on d4. If black just tries to continue in advanced French mode, then white takes in c5 now, and it's actually a worse version. Because if bishop g4 is played, black actually struggles to win back the pawns, even if they look like they're kind of easy to take. For instance, knight takes e5 would just be losing to the really nice tactic knight takes e5, followed by bishop b5. And that means black is forced to just be passive. And yeah, he just doesn't have the time to take back in the right sequence. I mean, it might look like, yeah, he could take back, but all of this is just too dangerous because white's not down a pawn because, of course, he did win one previously. And with the 2 bishops, this is just way too dangerous. So instead, black has to play passively, not win the pawn back until he does in the right moment, in which case white is still better. So that line is too risky. And I mean, what other move would you play here? I mean, I guess you could play e6, but then you're just being passive, right? So anyhow, c takes d4 is known to be the best move. And now white plays queen takes d4, which again, this is, I would say, the innovation here. Most players, the vast majority, play knight takes d4 because it just seemed pretty obvious. And it's a fine move too. Black is definitely theoretically not feeling too great here, or he's feeling okay, but white has a slight advantage. But queen takes d4 is the aggressive try. White is saying, my queen will probably go to f4, and I'm going to use it out there. Maybe I'll castle queenside, but either way, I got the pawn e5. Let me have my queen out so I can go and attack you. And what is black supposed to do about that? I guess tough luck. After queen f4, black played g6, and these are all the main line moves, actually. Black new theory here, as you can tell by the game time here. Both sides are moving instantly. Knight c3, d4. d4 is actually basically completely forced. Otherwise, white's going to be able to play bishop e3 and castle queenside, and that pawn in d5 will just be miserable forever. Again, white's just imagine all the ways your opponent can go wrong. Like most players will probably think blah blah blah, bishop g7, and then they'll be like, oh wait a minute, shoot, what am I supposed to do here? Castle and queenside, and then maybe they'll play e6 to try to bolster that pawn, and then they'll think, all right, let's play knight g7, and then you throw knight e4 at them because of the pin, and then okay, wow, man, my computer's get rid of that, get there, okay, I can't draw the arrows, and then it's actually just the worst for black. So anyhow, d4 is the best move. So keep in mind, I guess I know I'm going through this kind of quickly because there are a lot of games here, but trust me, I am showing all the best moves for black. I'm not just like making up hope chess here. Black is playing the GM moves, the engine moves, and still ending up in trouble in these lines, which is what makes them so effective. Anyway, white threatened mate, well, not even mate, but white threatened to take a free pawn. Unfortunately, black saw it. And white played knight e2 now. Obviously, the knight was attacked. And white understands the initiative is so good that, this pawn, even if it's taken later on, which it ends up being, it's okay because white has such a huge initiative. Black did decide, though, to take the pawn. First, of course, he deflected the queen, so there was no taking an f7. And he kind of needed to take this because if he didn't, d4 was super weak and white would just castle and win the pawn eventually. So this is kind of the best chance. Because also it gives black a potentially dangerous passer. And in fact, it's going to run immediately. White castled, and black played d3. Notice how black is still in preparation here, while white, probably not. I mean, I know a lot of players pretend to think in the opening, or they're trying to, recall their memory, but Nepomniachtchi always plays so quickly that, I mean, I don't think he would even try to pretend, because he's going to be fast anyway. I think legitimately he was on his own here, and he came up with a great novelty. Well, not novelty, but a different try. Eric Geisy was no doubt prepared for the move knight c3 here, which is the main line. And it's a crazy line because white's initiative is so big that after d2, which appears to win a piece, it actually doesn't because white can win it back, but he has to give the exchange. Maybe Eric Geisy had prep here. I imagine he did. White has enough compensation here, but, if white isn't prepared to the teeth, maybe he'll make one inaccuracy and just be down exchange, right? So Nepomniachtchi played knight f4, which is also a good move. And this one aims more to play e6 and not give up the exchange. Also, knight takes d3 is often a move here, and in fact is being threatened right now. For instance, if e6 had been played here, preventing white from doing this, knight takes d3 does work here because there's some attacks here and there's rook d1 coming. So if black thought he would win the piece, rook d1 would settle the debate in that. So going back here after knight f4, still e6 should have been played. Black just had to accept that the position would have been like that. And after, bishop takes c1, knight takes c1 is forced, and, black survives. Which is why, theoretically, knight c3 is probably the better try, because there's a huge dangerous initiative. And if you wanted to play this line as white, I suppose it's probably where you would go. Although there's even a couple, I think, deviations earlier. Anyway, the attack was now really dangerous, and after black played knight d4, white could have just played e6 here, and maybe he should have, but he chose to trade queens and just win his pawn back. Again, the other strange thing is he could have just checked here and forced his opponent to move the king and then taken. I'm not 100% sure why he didn't do that. I mean, the king would go to g7, but that just would have been a better version of the game here. So I'm not sure what Nepomniachtchi was thinking, because he actually was thinking this game. Unlike usual, he actually was using his time. Anyway, black was still worse. He attacked here, white defended, everything got traded off. And after knight h6, black cannot be prevented from castling. Unfortunately for him, it's because he needs to get castled so badly, white was able to just bully him and win the free pawn. And that was basically the end of it. And queen f3 is really dangerous, right? By defending this rook, white is unleashing discoveries with his knight. So let's say, for instance, black thought, let me defend my pawn. Then he gets absolutely cooked because the knight goes here, threatens to go to c6. There's queen c6 threats in the air. It's just game over. You just win the game. Maybe the more reasonable is play queen b6, but unfortunately knight c5 is still decisive, and with a threat of knight d7, black is just not going to be able to castle, and if he can't castle, he's eventually going to get destroyed. So black had to just give up the pawn, and that, unfortunately for black, was the end of the story. Now, objectively, black should defend, and he did actively for a couple moves, but he really is just down a pawn for no compensation. And technically, he made a slight error here. Rook d7 is apparently the only move to even hope to equalize. But I mean, I guess it makes sense to double up, but at the same time, it feels kind of weird to just maintain yourself in a pin forever and potential, discovered attack forever. Anyway, he tried to trade off, but unfortunately for him, after some accurate moves by Nepomniachtchi and then an inaccurate move by Ergaisi, e6 came in anyway, and black's king, was also horrible in addition to white being up a pawn. And white quickly swarmed, and after a few moves, it took a while, but he was just better in this endgame, and he went on to win. And the rest of this is not important, even though apparently he didn't play it perfectly, but eventually we have this massive blunder here. King takes e6 being the decisive mistake. I guess I shouldn't have just went over this rook sack so quickly. It is kind of a nice rook sack. White correctly realizing that he can just keep checking, and he doesn't even need to win it back immediately. So he just kept checking forever, and he didn't even try to win the rook. He just went for mate, and then black resigned because queen takes g6 and queen d5. So anyway, great game by Nepomniachtchi here, and legitimately, again, a good opening try. Knight f3 is not going to... I actually remember I faced this once against my friend Isaac Vega, and I was not prepared for it as black. So it's a smart move, These are exactly the kinds of moves you want to play, right? Completely objectively strong, but your opponents will just be like, huh? And maybe if you're lucky, they'll also think they're garbage, right? Because oftentimes if a player isn't ready for a move, maybe they get really scared and they play too timid, or they think that you're just playing a nonsense move and they just do whatever they want, and then they quickly realize that that wasn't smart. So our last game we're going to look at here is actually the least useful of all of them, but it's also the most brilliant game of the entire tournament, so we kind of have to cover it. Some of you might have seen this. This is the game Nepomniachtchi versus Hans Niemann, which I guess is extra drama now because I guess they played some match and, everyone's, I guess, excited about that. And this game, it also did have, I guess, technically a tryable opening, but you got to be so entrenched in chess to even want to play this line, I'll admit. But I think there's actually one instructional thing that for those of you that aren't, super obsessive about theory that you should be able to take away from this. And I just want to show you kind of where the Ruy Lopez main line is nowadays. So the Ruy Lopez is probably the most famous opening. Sicilian's up there, but the Ruy Lopez has got, naming rights backing down like what? Is it 500 years? Maybe 400 years? I forgot. Anyway, um, the mainline Ruy Lopez has always been in this sequence. Black plays a6, call the Morphe defense, but I mean, it's really just the main line because it's just so old and known. White backs up, of course. Black plays knight f6. All this is just almost universal. Finally, after castles, there is a possible deviation for black. He can take on e4 and enter the open open Ruy Lopez, but the vast majority of players play bishop e7, and white now plays rook e1, actually threatening to take on c6 and now take on e5. This is why black players now play the move b5, because in the previous moves, white was not really threatening to take on c6 and then e5 due to tactical reasons, but now he really is. So b5, bishop b3, and this is the starting position of the main line. And this is the one thing I want to go over, so hopefully you all learned something about the Ruy Lopez. Now, some of you might already know all this, but I think it's just interesting if you don't, because this is one of the most important positions in chess history, and actually even in topical chess these days. So, the general plan for white revolved around c3, preparing to play d4, and then to play h3 to prevent black from playing bishop g4. Here's how the old main line went. White would play c3, maybe going d4. Black would play d6 and say, oh no, don't play d4, or actually maybe I want you to play d4 because then I go bishop g4 and I equalize. And so white players would be smart and they would say, okay, fine, you play d6, I play h3, and then I play d4, and then I maneuver and maneuver forever. And I play these moves, or maybe I put the knight there instead. And, like at Nakamura, you could just draw the arrows all day, and it was just insane positional battles. The bishop would usually back up, and I guess they're fun for a certain kind of player. Then black players figured out, oh, I can play the marshal. I can just play this crazy move d5 because your knight can't go to c3 anymore. Now when I take, after knight takes d5, well, I am just giving up a pawn outright. But look at your garbage development, right? Complete lack of development. And that rook in e5 is going to be attacked, so it doesn't really help you that's developed. And after the smart move c6, black threatens bishop d6, queen h4, and we can already see the pieces come alive. I should also mention, very important in this line, is black will just try to march upon to f3 and bring the rook in the game. As we can see, with so many arrows, how can black be worse, right? And, well, actually, he could be worse. And it took, great engines and tons of theory over decades to finally convince white players to totally give the system up. And they were trying some funny things. Like white would try, like once the rook was attacked, go to e2, and the pawn would go to both squares, but everything was just too active for black. So then white players figured out, all right, fine, we'll play h3 first, and we'll be smart about this. Because now, of course, if you play d5, you look like an idiot because my knight can go to c3. And while you can do this, it's just a worse version. But then black players figured out, well, that's okay if you play h3, because I'll still play d5. After the move d3 now, again, c3, of course, is still run the marshal. D5 still works. And yeah, you can take the pawn, but even though it's not as exciting as the marshal, after knight d4, pretty smart move going after the bishop, and knight b4, the position has a 90% draw rate, which is probably everything you need to know about it. This time, black wins the bishop pair, tries to play queen d5, has active pieces, and there's not much white can do. And this is a long way of saying the only try now for white these days to even try to fight for an advantage here is to play the strange looking a4. That's just how modern chess is. Because this at least prevents the problems we saw with the previous lines. Because now if black plays bishop b7, sorry, and I guess is kind of hoping to play d5 early, white has just kind of move ordered him. Instead of having the move h3 thrown in, which is kind of useless, now the move a4 has been thrown in. And why does that matter? Well, thank you for asking. The reason that matters is this time, after the trade, e takes d5, knight takes d5, a takes b5. You can also just take the pawn immediately, which I guess we just show why this one move is different. Why does it matter we played a4? It's all coming down to this variation. Knight takes b3. And yes, white lost the bishop pair, but without the move h3 thrown in here and a4 instead, black's already in a lot of trouble. He's got to worry a little about pressure here. And b5, of course, is basically almost practically hanging. So, yes, very funny, but I hope this is just an instructional thing. For one thing, this is actually good to know because if you get high enough in chess, this is gonna be relevant information. But also, hopefully, it just goes to show how intricate and funny openings become, right? Like, I mean, why c3 was the old main line was so sensible, right? Why wouldn't I want to play d4? And then players figuring out, oh wait, that doesn't work. since I can't do c3 and h3, I'll do h3 first instead. But then figuring out that still did not get what they wanted. So somehow a4 rises to become the most theoretically challenging try. Anyway, let's just now go on to see what happened in this game. Bishop b7 is still a great move for black. I mean, how could it be wrong? But b4 is the main line and was played by Hans Niemann in this game. And this is sensible, right? You take some space. Knight's not going here, but you do create some weaknesses. Foreshadowing, right? So b4 was played. Now white plays d4, and this is all a ton of theory. We're just going to speed run through this. I mean, technically, there's eventually going to be a really impressive opening novelty, but it's here. So d takes e5, knight takes e5, and I guess the impressive part is here. Most players as white sidestep and play queen e2, a perfectly reasonable attempt to play for an advantage here. After all, what is black doing with these queenside weaknesses? These pawns are not very well placed. Why don't I just clear it out of the way, develop my knight, potentially get an attack on the queen side, and you never know what will happen. And as you might expect, it's like, 80%, draws, like 15% white wins, 5% black wins, which is, I guess, fair enough in chess. But Nepomniachtchi took a d8. Now, I'm not, again, this is not something I'd probably recommend, unlike the other three lines, for everyone to adopt. Although this game is so brilliant, maybe you should. But the idea is the pressure is not over in the endgame, even though everyone would think it is. And in fact, in the Masters database, black has outscored white here. So again, this is just such a brilliant game. Because after the moves that were played, you just wouldn't think there was anything going on here. I mean, if anything, you think, well, isn't black comfortable here? He's got the open file. He'll get his pieces out, which of course he did. And now he's even threatening knight g4, which is actually kind of annoying. Because if you just try to stop it with the obvious h3, then you got to worry about e4. And this isn't easy at all. In fact, arguably black is the one with the better game here because white's bishop still hasn't gotten out. But Nepomniachtchi was prepared here and he played knight f3. Black played the move knight g4. It's unclear whether Hans was still in prep here or not. But it's very clear after these next couple moves that he definitely was not in preparation. Because after the trade happened, he took half an hour and played rook d6, which is the best move. And in the database, black has scored 2 wins and 20 draws. So in top level chess, that is like a dream come true. But and you could see why, right? It looks like the rook's out, the bishop will come, the pawns are doubled, and even though white will probably win this pawn, black will win that one. You think black's more active. If anything, be careful, white. But Nepomniachtchi believes in this line. He played it 7 years ago against Ding Liren, and in that game he played the move rook a d1. And after that, we had this happen here. Ding at first played the most accurate moves, but then in this position, he did mess up slightly, which just goes to show how complicated these endgames can be. I mean, it might seem obvious what the targets are, but you have to play accurately to defend. Now, rook d8 probably should have just been played here, after which white is not really any better at all. But I guess maybe Ding Liren was thinking, oh, there's some tactic here, right? Even though it turns out it should be okay. But you do need to know this key move f5, which I guess, Ding Liren did not calculate or see or something. And he takes f5. You can't even just take back immediately. You need to play e4 and, a lot of details. So anyway, this all did happen before. And Nepomniachtchi got an advantage in this game, but he wasn't able to convert it, and Ding defended accurately and held the draw. But this time, Nepomniachtchi, I guess he remembered this prep. I don't know when he did it, if he did it like that long ago or he did it a lot later, instantly played bishop d5. Which, again, you would generally think, okay, how am I going to play this as white? I will win this pawn, he will win that pawn. Let me just bring my rooks in the game. h3, kicking back the knight before to maybe win the e5 pawn, and rook d1 are the only moves that have been played in this position, because they make sense. And after rook a d1, black was going to play bishop e6 and just declare the draw, or at least declare full equality, right? As mentioned, this is what happened, in that one game, and, with Ding Liren and Nepomniachtchi. I mean, it really is just objectively equal, right? So what is the point of this move? The point is to provoke c6. So for one thing, the bishop is garbage if it went to b7. But also, if white takes an e5, eventually c6 will be attacked. And that's really impressive. That's just... Because the thing is, white lost the tempo to do this. This is not just like c6 is just given for free. Like, yeah, I guess anyone could say, okay, yeah, black playing c6 hurts his position. But to see that and just know even he can just give up a tempo here and it still works. And I mean, it looks strange, but after bishop e6, now white took the open file, and in all the endgames where this happens eventually, white will have benefited himself more than losing the tempo. Anyway, we got the trade, and after bishop takes e6, Black did not take with the rook because he understood that there would be some dangers with the white playing rook d1, which I guess is probably correct. You know, the rook will infiltrate, and who wants to allow that? So he took with the f pawn. Again, still fine. And king f1. You know, and this is just a nice, impressive example of just slow playing the position. White just understands he's a little bit better because he's faster. But this also involves seeing a really incredible line, which happened in the game. Hans went back. He wasn't scared of the knight trades. This would just trade off more pawns for the draw. Nepomniachtchi saw that rook d1 really puts black in danger. Again, all thanks to that beautiful knight takes e5 move. Black played rook d5, which I think is probably more accurate than trading the rooks, even though they're both technically draws. Everything's technically a draw, but it's never easy. And after the trade, I mean, it's technically a draw, but now we can start to realize that's not that easy. White's king is a little more active, and these pawns can really become targets. And that's what happened in the game, which I guess we're not going to look at too closely. I think I've seen multiple videos made on it. I think Gotham Chess made a pretty good video. Nakamura made a horrible video. So, you know, there's enough people talking about this game. And eventually, I mean, I'm just a really cool thing, you know. Nepomniachtchi figuring out, yeah, I can just sack my knight here, and my king is active enough to go scoop up these pawns that I'll win against the knight. Again, very nice. And this was technically the losing blunder. I guess he had to go here instead. And that's the crazy part. He had to not win the knight. He had to just trap the knight enough while keeping his king here so that the king can blockade and at least hold these onto these pawns. For instance, in a position like this, black can at least wait around and he doesn't lose these pawns. But it's just really hard to see. I mean, you would still think, well, isn't this horribly dangerous? But then it turns out, well, this time, black is now quick enough to take it. The problem with black's attempt in the game to win this knight is, well, he does allow them, it does just take too long. Now he can't go king c6. He did in the wrong order because then knight b5, knight here, and black would still win the knight, but, well, white wouldn't care because white would win all these pawns, right? Like this. And yeah, too many pawns have been lost. I guess you can take, you don't even have to take. That's funny. It's more accurate to not take. But anyway, in the game, yeah, black won the knight, but it was just too dangerous and the pawns were too numerous. And, you know, for someone like Nepomniachtchi, I don't think this is too hard to calculate. I'm sure at this point, Hans also knew he was lost. He tried to put up some resistance by playing, you know, unexpected moves, I suppose, here, but it ultimately didn't work and the pawns were just too good. And finally, he resigned here. So, yeah, that game went, okay, this whole video went a little bit longer than I planned, but anyway, let me know what you guys think of this kind of format or style of videos, or if I should make another one. There are always so many events going on. I guess I'll show it how the easiest way to find these games yourself is to just go and watch broadcasts and Lichess. There's always some sort of random tournament, not always a super tournament, but Swiss is going on, and they're always just great sources of content. Like, what we got? We got the World Youth Championship. That's got to be interesting because kids are good enough at opening preparation, but if they have seconds and, like, you know, other grandmasters that are like paid to do it, I mean, you can bet the preparation for a kid that is studying chess all day is probably terrifying. Actually, I'm kind of curious to see what kind of prep they have. But all right. Well, maybe this is too long of a video anyway. But if you guys made it to the end, which that's kind of funny, you know, probably no one actually made it to the end. Like, I'm guessing if you're hearing these words right now, it's because you scrolled to the end because you got really bored. I guess still thank you for scrolling to the end, but like, is there any way I don't, well, whatever. Thank you for watching in either case. And yeah, I guess try these out and let me know if you think they're interesting. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one, if there is a next one.